Bonjour, chers collègues, dear colleagues. My presentation today runs the risk of stating the obvious. I'm sure all of you have made the observations I will be talking about yourself when you were investigating the archives you are working on. It concerns some aspects of the diplomatics of the archival documents, a topic that has been receiving more attention during the last decades, not in the least at the instigation of one of the esteemed organizers of this conference. So I want to thank the organizers at this moment. When we reconstruct archival dossiers, we have the prosopography to help us, but also diplomatics and also, for example, museum numbers. They can help, not only because they may reflect the order of acquisition, but also because the curators group them according to their visual appearance, their shape and their size. Along the same line, Babylonian archive keepers organized their tablets on shelves, in baskets or jars. They included visual aids to quickly identify the type of records. So I am going to talk about the factors that a scribe takes into account when he prepares a tablet which he will write. And because Nippur is such a beautiful point of departure, as we have just seen with Wiebke too, I will take some case studies, and one big case study from the city of Nippur. So what am I going to talk about? About the shape, the size, and a little bit less, because it doesn't fit in 20 minutes, of course, the sealing practices and the orientation of tablets, and also the material, just a little bit. So the shape. We all know, we've been learned that one can recognize the obverse and reverse easily. The obverse is flat and the reverse is more rounded of tablets. But that is not always as explicit, and it depends on the type of documents. With title deeds from Nippur, it's very well visible, as you can see on the edges of the picture. With loans and leases from Nippur, sometimes it's absent and sometimes it's just not well pronounced. Here you don't see a difference between the obverse and the reverse, but you do see a difference with the top, on the top and the bottom, so the size of the obverse is actually a little bit smaller than the size of the reverse. And with administrative documents, it is very often absent in Nippur, and sometimes it's just not well pronounced. There are other factors as well with respect to shape. We've seen the documents which Gabriela presented this morning have the pointed edges, which can offer us an easy clue to situate the documents, rounded edges, pointed edges, things like that. So the archive, which was on the last document, you see here 2 examples of it, is the administrative archive I'm going to look at more thoroughly during this talk, or it's a reconstructed archive, it's a dossier, of course. It has been discussed by Kraus, Robertson, and myself, and it's difficult to situate because it covers a very interesting range of topics related to the various temples of Nippur, but also related to the management of the city of Nippur, actually. Discussing recording expenditures for infrastructural works on the city canal and on the city walls, expenditures for visitors from other cities, and also recording sacrificed animals or fodder for to fatten animals, so related to temple administration. So the archive is very interesting with respect of the content, that all these aspects are managed together. It's also interesting because it has, or frustrating more actually, because it has an impossible dating system, which works with month cycles, and we will not go into that. It's just a way to recognize the tablets, but it makes it impossible to situate a tablet at a certain point of a year. So if we look at the size, well, what determines the size of a tablet? Basically, the amount of text you want to write on the tablet. Wiebke just talked about these divisions of inheritance, and in the Zigu family, the divisions of inheritance of the first generations are huge, have 4 columns on each side, and the most recent ones are much smaller. So that is, and of course we have to take into account the fact that not the complete estate is divided and those things, but still, it's very clear that the tablets get smaller. So when a scribe prepares a tablet, he knows how much he's going to write on it. But other factors are taken into account or get systematized once an archive gets organized. So if we look at this administrative archive with the unusual month names, we see the most, the best attested type of document is, because it's daily, every day they wrote a document like this, a fodder allocation to fatten animals. And as you can see, it's small, 2 centimeter on 3 centimeter, 2 on 3, and it's very thin. So the range is actually quite small. If you look at the different tablets, the thickness always lies between 14 millimeters and 12 millimeters. And this is different for another frequent type of tablet. The expenditures of animals, they are thicker, between 21 millimeter and 15 millimeter. And you know, it's not only the visual aspects that is very different, that once you've seen a couple of them, you see it immediately. It's even the weight. If you have it in your hand, you feel that it's another tablet because it's thicker than the daily account of animal fodder. This one, it's more squarish, so it's broader too. Then a final frequent type of documents in this file are the lists of miscellaneous barley expenditures. And these are a bit more complicated, of course, because some tablets only record 1 expenditure, some 2, some 7, or even there are summaries and things like that. So the height there's a much larger range, and I only included the measurements because I only have those exact measurements of the tablets in the Hilprechtsammlung. I know that in Philadelphia there are some larger tablets, but compared to the expenditures of animals, these are actually thinner too. So, and there's a special group within these miscellaneous barley expenditures, a group of sealed documents. And they have 2 very specific aspects. They are sealed and they are written in a landscape format. And as you can see, they are quite thin too. And they have a width, they are wider here's so they are wider. You see the height. One is actually not landscape, but square, because it concerns more expenditures. So it's a landscape tablet on which the scribe wanted to write many expenditures, so he made a square tablet in the end, or more or less square. So when we put these measurements together, the most telling part is the thickness. These daily fodder lists really are very small, very thin compared to the others. The miscellaneous barley expenditures, the sealed ones, I'm sorry, are quite thin as well, have a little bit of a larger range, but they don't weigh very much either. And if we look at the possibility, another feature of the daily accounts of animal fodder is the fact that their right side is more rounded than their left side. So these documents that are made every day are prepared knowing what they would look like and how they would be stored, and they are prepared in the same way as the previous ones. So here we are. The obverse and the size of the obverse and the reverse is more flexible, except for the daily fodder lists. That's also something that speaks for itself. It's always more or less the same range of animals that receive, so we have the same number of entries that we have to take into account, and that is not the case with the miscellaneous barley expenditures. So here you see the two landscape, you see two of the landscape documents, and you see, you see that this one actually is not landscape because it has many entries, but it does include the ceiling. It has the same type of expenditures, and it is broader than the other miscellaneous barley expenditures. So it has taken the width of the other sealed documents, but the scribe prepared it a little bit longer because he wanted to write a lot on it. These documents have also in common that the entries involve persons from other towns, rather systematically. And these type of expenditures very occasionally occur in the other documents. And when they occur there, they probably occur in summary documents. But it's difficult to make that distinction. What is a summary? What is a moment when they just write one or two or three single entries? So these documents are sealed, and that brings us to the next question. What are the sealing practices in Nippur? They're different from other towns. And so the legal texts is a different chapter altogether, with the burgal seals and the personal seals and their own use. The administrative texts, in general, it makes sense to seal them if the responsibility is transferred, if just you want to have proof that you've handed over the responsibility. Because I'm asking this question because I want to understand why these documents were sealed, the documents that concern, and this is a different one actually, the documents that concern expenditures to people from other towns, why only those are sealed? And I cannot really answer the question. But then, of course, so I've been talking about how this archive is very systematic in, not only in writing things down, but in shaping the tablets before writing on them. And maybe Jomber things, but they aren't systematic because of this tablet. I was identifying all the seals, also in the Philadelphia collection, and in his review, Jomber said, there's another one with the sealing, but I overlooked it, because this is not a miscellaneous barley expenditure, it's an expenditure of a ram as an offering. So my conclusion is that this is one of the exceptions that confirms the rule. Sometimes they just were too fast. I can understand that from my part. And then, knowing this example, I found another one. This text clearly has the looks of a fodder expenditure, daily fodder expenditure, but it's not. It's a single miscellaneous barley expenditure where an amount of barley is given to a soldier on the day that the Huenakum did something cultic, something important. So this is another exception, an example where a scribe made a tablet, just as he's used to do every day, but started writing on a different type, which just confuses the storage, I suppose. But since we have about 300 of these daily barley expenditures, and they are all very consistent, I think I can make the point that this is an exception. So we can conclude that this is a very sophisticated, small administration in which the administrator really tried to organize his stuff in a systematic way. And there's one last aspect before I come to the next phase. So we also know, well, the material obviously it's clay, but probably you've also seen that the clay on title deeds very often is much smoother than the clay on leases and loans, on obligations. So what would you expect of the clay of administrative documents? Would you expect it to be like loans or like title deeds? There's no reaction, of course, because who would expect it to be like title deeds? Raise your hands, please. No one. Who would expect it to be like loans? Like loans, yes, well, it's because title deeds are to be kept. Well, actually, they are like title deeds. They're fantastic. They're so, I don't know if you can see it, but you can feel. It's so fine and beautiful. It's not coarse in this case. It's really smooth and really beautiful, which is just something. I think it's interesting. I will not give an explanation, give an answer, because indeed, you would expect them not really to make it extremely smooth. But this one, he was very proud of his administration, I think. So, oh, ben u toch? Yeah, here. So, this one. So, they are, even the daily accounts are very nice and smooth. But then, even this story becomes more complicated I have discovered 1.5 years ago in Philadelphia. When I was looking at the bullae, I expected them to be from the age of Samsuluna, because I think that everything which is in Philadelphia can also be found in the Hilprechtsammlung, but these documents can't. And I think they can't because they are part of the N collection, which was considered to be fragmentary and not important, so which probably was never really looked at. Hilprecht did not really have the opportunity to look at them, or take the opportunity, let's put it that way. So the exact same types of documents are also recorded on bullae in this system, which was also recently discussed by our esteemed one of our esteemed organizers, of strings of administration. So in that case, only the day is marked, of course, because I think there are monthly strings in the case of the animal fodder. There are some months mentioned on the cattle and livestock delivery, so that's not monthly. So these are copies of it, because they're very hard to read on photos. So I made copies of them. There are on these documents no months or year names except for 2 cattle and livestock accounts. And one of these is dated, so there's only 1 year name, and it's dated to Rimsin 29. And there are other differences. The fodder accounts include birds, which took me a while to find out, because I wasn't expecting it. All these documents are not real, literally parallels, but they document exactly the same procedures in a little bit in different words, which is very convenient, because then you can finally make sense of a few things. But there's what's going on when an administration all of a sudden changes completely. We can situate it, and this is, I was thinking about that too when hearing Niels' talk yesterday. Rimsin 30, the conquest of Isin. At that point, Rimsin introduces various innovations to unify his territory, to organize his territory, one of which was the unusual month name system, and since that, contrary to the ones you proposed, was not practical, it was not kept, luckily, only in this frustrating archive. But it's also at that moment that this administration changes its procedure completely. So that's another thing about shapes and sizes. So, going back to the beginning, how does a scribe prepare the tablet he will write? What are the factors? So, when we look at the size, of course, the amount of information is very relevant, but also the content, the type of tablet he will be writing, plays a role when he is shaping and sizing his tablets. The shape is related to the content of the tablet or to the tradition of the town, of course, to what one is used to. And the sealing of administrative tablets, I have to note that, I didn't write that down, but of administrative tablets happens before the tablets being written upon, and is also, in that way, has become part of the diplomatic procedure rather than the content of confirming what is happening. So many of these characteristics are related to the content of the record, but they become a distinguishing feature of the type of text, which then allows for a quick and easy classification. So we have both things going on at the same time. And something else going on at the same time, the factor of local traditions, political centralization. It's a real society, so nothing is really simple, of course. Thank you.